On fire, right? I take things literally. Well, I'm really pleased to introduce you to our moderator today, and very proud that we have a wonderful partnership with the San Jose Mercury News. And so it's my pleasure to introduce you to one of their stellar reporters, Michelle Quinn, who is very well versed in what's happening in the Valley and wrote, in fact, a wonderful piece this last weekend on Saturday about the topic that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So without further ado, have a great session. Thank you, Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We are going to talk about something very specific. I mean, you learned over there how to climb Mount Everest and apply it to your daily life. This is really about technical women, that they have they're a special category. And so we've got 3 technical women, and they have the chops to prove it. So I'm going to let them, what we're going to do is I'm going to let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their lives. And then think about questions. We're going to save about 15, 20 minutes at the end for questions. I'll call for it, and then you can come up to the microphone and ask the questions yourself, so you don't have to write it down. But before we begin, I just want to mention that the stats, some of the things that you all know, that technical women are a rarity, that there's about the same number of women going into technical fields as there was 20 years ago in terms of degrees. That's not true in medicine, that's not true in law. So yeah, let's put aside the fact that the entry points have not increased for women, or at least the number of women going into these fields has not increased. When women get to be mid-career, they leave their profession at about twice the rate that men leave. So the question is why? And what I'm interested in is not why they leave necessarily, although that's pretty interesting, but also why do they stay? And these 3 women are thriving in their careers and in their professions. So without further ado, I would like each of you to introduce yourselves and also say something about kind of your careers, if you can. Cindy. Okay.
Okay, I'm Cindy Warner. I'm the managing partner for cloud strategy at IBM. And I've been in tech my entire career, 32 years. I know I don't look that old. But have been in a tech profession my entire career, starting in a highly technical area. So I was a developer, and then moved into systems implementations, and then moved into strategy. So I've done strategy for about the last 10 years, give or take, of my career. And I would say, from the standpoint of mid-career leaving, I never thought about leaving. I can't think of anything I'd rather do, except maybe run my restaurant. And a few other little data points. I do own a 1938 diner, and I also own a food truck. And I also, for a little-known fact, while he was married to Heidi Klum, I kissed Seal. So with that...
Oh, my God. It's going to be hard to follow.
There you go.
Hey, all right.
Okay, you know, watching Allison speak, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a hard act to follow. Now, after that comment about I kiss Seal, I may as well stop now. But anyway, so I'm Nandini Ramani, and I'm with Oracle. I run the Java group as well as the Internet of Things platform and strategy for Oracle. Sort of like Cindy, I've had a longish career in technology, and at this point, it's pretty much all I know. I have friends who say, oh, I would love to paint or garden or anything. Other than technology, I basically know nothing. So, you know, it's all I'm passionate about, and I love it, and I've never considered leaving. In fact, I think I've doubled down and trying to find other new things to do. So, I started my career in hardware, building in the group that built ASIC chipsets and UltraSparks and things at Sun Microsystems. Prior to that, I was in a startup, but I kind of divvy my span in technology into partly in hardware and then the rest of it in software. And that was not an easy transition either, jumping from a core hardware team to do software. And I'll share a little more about that with you guys. And then maybe at this point I should hand it over to Poornima, but that's roughly what my background is.
Thank you. Yeah, so my career is probably a little bit shorter, but that doesn't mean that I haven't been in technology just as long. I actually came to the States when I was 2, and my dad was getting a master's in electrical engineering at the college down the street. He was at San Jose State, and since my parents were immigrants, couldn't afford daycare or anything like that, I would go to all of his classes and sit in on the lectures, and that was my first introduction to technology. Obviously, I didn't know what the heck was going on. But after that point in time, I just always was very interested, so I would do projects at home, then later went on to major in electrical engineering and computer science in college. And then, not my first job, but my second job was as the founding engineer of Mint.com. So that was my first startup, and I was happy by the success of it, and I really wanted to just stay in that startup mode, because to me what was the most exciting, or still is the most exciting, is being able to just build a product and a company from scratch and my own. So I've gone on to start 2 businesses, BusyBee, which is a CRM solution for fitness businesses, and then Femgineer, which is an education company, and our mission is to get more women into technical leadership roles. So more of these seats hopefully will be filled in the future.
Great, thank you. Well, let me just ask you a question about, kind of goes to the raison d'etre of this whole panel, which is, is there something special about being a technical woman? Like, is there something about technical women that have special challenges as opposed to managers, HR people in your firm, the sales force? The 3 of you came in, and you said you were at Salesforce as well. So you've been at a startup, or I guess you were there in the early part. Maybe you're speaking to the choir here, but what are the challenges about being a technical woman, and also, maybe some of the things that you've done to overcome them? All right, whoever is interested.
Okay, well, I was the one and only technical woman on our team at Mint, even right after the acquisition. And I think the biggest challenge that I had to learn was to speak up. And not because I wasn't loud, but just like the opportune moments when I knew that I was right about something. And initially, I would always defer to a man on my team. Not because they had any more years of experience than me, but just because I was like, I might not be right, or I might be wrong, or what if this whole thing blows up because I'm wrong? And so after a while, I saw all the times that the guys made mistakes after they spoke up, and I was like, well, I guess I have a 50-50 shot here. And that's when I realized I really needed to speak up. And the other reason I realized I needed to speak up is because when they spoke up, they would actually get what they wanted. And so I was like, that's a really novel concept. I need to start doing that. And I've gone on to mentor a number of technical women, and over again, even their managers tell me, they're so quiet. We know they write great code. We know that they're capable, but they never speak up in meetings, or they never present ideas. So I always see that as one challenge when you are either the only technical woman, or when you're in the minority group as a technical woman.
I'm interested in everybody else. That's great. Nandini, is somebody, how long were you at Sun?
I was at Sun for about 14 years, and now about 4.5 years at Oracle.
Okay.
Something like that. I think the crux of it is the fact that we're a minority. There's nothing different about being in technology as opposed to being a teacher or a, what have you. However, there's fewer of them that make it. If you look at the stats, there are more girls in school than there are boys, they say, who graduate from actual traditional schooling.
Right.
However, when you come to the workforce, the number in technology drops significantly because most of them are choosing to do other things. And my personal view, there's nothing wrong with choosing other professions. However, speaking up in a room where you're a minority, whether it's a minority based on gender or any other, is always harder. And I think that's the fundamental difficulty about being in technology. I don't for a second believe we're not capable of writing better code, or whether it's hardware where there are fewer women than men. In software there are more women than there are in hardware. But I really think the fundamental of it is because there's fewer of them, so you're kind of you're lost a little bit in a group where you're a minority, and I think that's primarily the challenge. And I say this because I have a daughter who when she was in school, would do exceptionally well in math, and she was part of the math club and everything. Then they get to middle school, and it becomes uncool to be part of the math club. And there are more boys than there are girls, and she quickly was just like, I'm not going to this thing anymore, because, you know, I think we kind of perpetuate this thing of, and I just came on the heels of my daughter going to prom. If the boy has to ask you out, it's like so archaic. Why are we still in this mode of the boys have to do this and the girls have to do this? So I mean,
But we're still in that mode, and it's a lot about social norms.
That's what it is. It's more social than anything else. But yeah.
And Cindy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think we take ourselves too seriously. I think, you know, and maybe it's the field that we're in that makes us take ourselves too seriously. I'm not quite sure. But I remember my mom saying to me, and thank God she said this to me because she passed away at 60, but she was probably about 50, so that made me like 30. And she just looked at me one day and she's like, what is wrong with you? You take yourself so seriously. You know, you've forgotten how to laugh. You've forgotten how to have fun. You know, everything is just, you know, so rigid, it seems like. And I think, quite candidly, I think that's a differentiation for us versus men, because I don't think they necessarily take themselves as seriously, and they keep that balance of fun and the good-spiritedness or what have you. And she really, like, awakened the, I guess, God love her, Mom, please don't strike me, but she awakened the beast in me, because I was like, all right, I got it, you know, and having the balance and having fun and knowing it was okay to have fun during the work week. You know, there's 5 out of 7 days that you're working. You don't want to just have fun 2 days a week. And so I think not taking yourself so seriously and having people realize you're a real person, you're approachable, because a lot of that, if we take ourselves so seriously, we're not approachable, right? We look a little bit harsh, we look a little bit hard, and people are like, don't want to touch that.
Now, I just heard Allison, the Mount Everest climber, who said, when somebody said, what's the most important thing, or she said, what's the most important thing to be a member of a team? And the number one thing she said was competence. And it made me think, like, wow, is that like an extra pressure for the technical woman? To, you know, you've gotten your degree, your multiple degrees, and you know hardware and you know software, but you're still entering a room and you've got to prove that competence quicker, faster. I mean, is that an issue?
Well, I think that's what makes us take ourselves so seriously.
Right. It seems like.
I mean, I think we've got this big veneer where we're like, we got to prove we're competent. And if I look back, I think maybe only twice somebody was dumb enough to test my competency, and I don't, you know, I think probably both of them regret it. But the fact is, it's really never been about competency. It's really been about more team-spiritedness, approachability, likability. Because all of that, if you're not approachable, people don't think you're necessarily likable, and they don't want to follow you, and they don't look at you as a good leader. So, you know, I don't know personally if it's the competence thing as much as we keep thinking we have to prove over and over and over again that we're competent, and I think we kind of overachieve there.
Anybody else on the competence?
Well, one of the things that Allison said that I think is very true is it's the confidence to know that you're competent. So a lot of times, you know, a lot like the women that I coach, unfortunately, they know the stuff, but then they end up using a language that's so vague when they approach a manager or even their teammate. They're like, oh, you know, I think maybe possibly, and then the person on the other end's like, do you even know what you're doing, right? And even though you might have the right answer or you might have the right approach, all of the wording around it and the way that you present it is so not confident that it makes you seem not competent as a result. So that, I think, has to change, and even if you feel like you are doubtful or whatnot, you know, go with it and then see what the results are rather than even, you know, not even proposing.
Nandini.
So one thing I want to say, well, you know, of course we all want to be competent, but however, so when I made the switch from hardware to software, I certainly knew a lot about hardware because I'd built up the skill set. None of us come out of school knowing anything, frankly. However, when you go into software, you have to have know the difference between being someone eager to learn and showing that you can be competent even if you don't know the subject matter. You know what I mean? You have the ability to learn. And that's what people are looking for. That's what I look for. I'm not expecting you to know how to code and be this super bug-free software developer. But you do need to have the eagerness, the willingness, and a big part of it is accepting that you don't know something and that you can learn from someone who's either younger, older, whatever. Being open to those sort of things, I think, is equally important. So competence is not just knowing your subject, but it's, you know.
Let me ask you a question about kind of pivotal moments in your career. So like I was saying before, there's a study by the Anita Borg Institute, and it's kind of old, it's 2008, that said women mid-career are dropping out at a higher rate. About mid-career, I guess 10 years in, they're considering mid-career, about 50% of the women drop out of technical fields. Double the rate of men. So I'm just interested if there's like a moment or one example you can give from your own career where it was like, I could zig that way, or I could zag that way, but I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. I mean, I don't even know what it is, where there's like a barrier or choice or something hard. Okay, Cindy.
I think the only time that I've ever really kind of had that seminal moment, I actually wanted to, as you probably heard from my, my intro, I wanted to run restaurants. And so it had nothing to do with leaving tech. It had everything to do with thinking that I was going to be, you know, the world's best gourmet chef. And that didn't work out too well because I opened a gourmet store in 2008.
Oh, bad timing.
I opened it in Detroit.
Oh, okay.
And if anybody remembers in September of 2008 what happened to Detroit in the auto industry, yeah, timing's everything. So when you hear Allison talk about failure, that would be me. Was not a good move, but it was just at one point in time, I said in my life, financially I can do this, I want to do it, and I just went and did it, and the timing was pretty wrong, but that was probably the only time I thought about leaving this.
Okay.
For me, I think it was when I had my first child. So I got pregnant, and I was one of these who were like, oh, I'm going to drop the kid off in daycare from day one, I'm going to be back in the workforce, and didn't really think it through. And then after I had my child, though, and this is to the fundamental difference between men and women, I'm not a very mothering sort of person, never have been. However, when I had my own firstborn, I just forgot about the fact that I even ever wanted a career or anything. And it was so easy just to be there, go to jamboree, whatever the thing is called, you know, all of those things. And one day my dad on the phone was like, this was, I think, 6 months into it, and he's like, so have you started looking? What do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I haven't really thought about it. And he's like, this is a big decision for you. If you really want to stay home, not that he was telling me to do one way or the other, he said, just think it through. And I think I snapped out of it at that point. So I did at that point. I would have driven my husband crazy, I think, if I'd stayed home. But nevertheless, there was that. And the reason I say it is like for most women, all of us go through that, right? Kids and family balancing. You heard Allison say, I'm not around for my friends' weddings and whatever it is. So with kids, it's a choice you make at that point, and for life, you have to live with that choice of not being there for a recital or not making it to a meeting after 5 because you have to pick up your kids. And it's an ongoing thing that a lot of us women have to learn to deal with. And even if you took time out, it isn't impossible to get back. You just have to want it bad enough.
So did you go back at 6 months, or did you go find? Did you take? I'm just a little curious.
Then I took contracts. I stayed home because I wasn't ready to give up my child going to daycare. That was the first one. But the second one, 4 weeks into it, I was back. But
okay,
that's a whole other story.
And do you feel, so you worked at some pretty, like, I mean, I look at Sun as kind of like one of the DNA companies in the Valley. How did your colleagues deal with you being, you know, not able to stay until 8 o'clock working, or?
And it is hard, I have to admit it is, right? Because you hang out with people who don't have all the responsibilities you do. And I'll say the Valley has changed somewhat now with the younger startups and things, but things fundamentally haven't changed. There are a bunch of people who hang out at work, they eat at work, they date at work, everything is right there. And then you have to leave because you're daycare, whatever, you don't want to, you're guilty and whatever, and you want to leave at 3:30. It was hard for me. The first couple years was very hard. I had to deal and make peace, and I think my husband bore the brunt of it because I was getting on his case about it every day. But now in hindsight, when I look back, I wish I had the maturity that I do now, but I don't know if I'm all there, but to accept the fact that yes, there are only 24 hours in the day and you get to choose how you split your time. And then deal with the fact that it's okay not to be somewhere. And life is about the journey. It's not a race to get to whatever that mythical top is. Right. So I think you should just go with whatever it is and be upfront with your manager, or find the right combination of chemistry between you and the people you work with and the person you work for.
Poornima, has there been a moment like that for you at this stage?
Sure. Well, I guess I'd be that person that's in the 10-year that would be like getting ready to leave, right? So it's definitely not the case. I think for me, I've had a couple moments. The first was I was actually at 22. When I first got here, you know, I had to make this decision, or actually, it was, yeah, 22. I had to make this decision of, did I want to continue going this very structured route of either working at a big company or, you know, making a lot of money, doing sort of what my parents had wanted, etc. You know, getting married and all of that, or did I want to join this like really cool sounding startup and, you know, risk it all? And for me, you know, at 22, 23, the thinking that I had was, well, I think I've got like 10 years until I have to have a kid. So I'm just going to buy my time and do whatever I want and then hope everything turns out wonderfully. It just so happened that, yes, okay, some nice things did happen. And then at 27, I had that decision again, where I started to feel a little bit older. And of course my parents were definitely on my case, but I was like, no, now I have like only one more opportunity. Like I only have 3 or 4 or 5 years left, so I've really got to like put all the effort in, and I've got to start my own business this time. And so what I realized in each of these was that there's a lot of opportunities. You don't actually run out of time, and that, like you mentioned, there's only 24 hours in a day, so you've got to figure out how you want to invest your time, and then you've got to make it clear to other people, you know, what it is that you won't and you will and won't do. And if they value your work, then they're willing to come halfway and meet you. And I've coached a number of women through that process, even those who had like a 6-month-old say, I don't want to tell my boss about it, and then I asked them a question, well, what happens when you have to leave at 5? Aren't they going to look at you funny? I'm like, yeah, well, we'll get to that when that happens.
So didn't want to tell them that there was a baby waiting at daycare.
Exactly,
okay,
when
right.
they were interviewing, yeah.
Right.
They didn't want to explain why they had to leave at 5. And then I told them, you know, it's kind of funny you mentioned this because I just interviewed a senior software engineer who lives in San Francisco, a guy who told me he can't drive down 5 days a week to Mountain View. He only wants to come in 4 days a week. And everybody on the team's like, oh, he's a rock star, let's bring him in. And when I explained that story, she was like, oh, okay, well then I'm gonna mention the baby, I'm gonna leave at 5, right? So I think the big part is, you know, you still make the decisions you want to in your life, you prioritize them, you think about those pivotal moments, but then you also get what you need at the end of the day, and you make sure other people understand that you need that.
Does that work during a period like now, which is a kind of a boom? Where there's,
absolutely.
But does it work? Does it work in the opposite, which is you're sitting here in 2008, and it's like, oh my God, you know, do I have a job? Is the whole economy collapsing? I mean, can you be a negotiator when there's a feeling of scarcity around? Everybody's freaked out.
I started my career in 2004. It was like the slump period. You know, I moved to Silicon Valley, and people were like, "You're an idiot. It's really expensive. Are you really going to make a career in tech? Didn't you just see that the bubble burst, right?" So a lot of people were very like, this is dumb. You should go to consulting. You should go to New York. You should do iBanking. And I was like, no, I love technology. That's what I want to do. And I was only 22, and I was competing against people that had PhDs and masters, and I negotiated a 10K raise because I was like, I can't afford to live in Silicon Valley unless you give me this additional money, right? Mind you, they could have just been like, oh, we don't need this kid. Like, what the hell does she know, right? I mean, they had other people in the pipeline, but it was mentioning that to them, right? It was mentioning, look, you're looking for someone with a hardware and software background. I have that. That's my leverage in this situation.
Right.
And I think you have to take the time to understand what your leverage is in that situation and not feel like you're a dime a dozen, or it's only a boom time, or it's a terrible time in the market. That's what you've got to concentrate on.
So not kind of get all macro, like bad time in the market, I'm competing against a lot of people, you know, I'm old, I'm whatever.
Or young.
I'm too young, I'm too old. You just have to think, find that leverage point. That's a really great takeaway. Let me ask you about something else that came up. We actually had a little conversation ahead of time, and one thing that came up was comfort zones. And is kind of key to keeping your career going, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, whatever that is, whether it's oh, I'm working 4 days a week, I really like this is kind of comfortable. And just as a little aside, what, again, this Anita Borg study that I keep referring back to talks about what happens to women and the comfort zones is that they tend not to take risk as they get older. And part of the reason is they sense that taking risk is scarier. So maybe when you're 22, taking a risk is a little easier prospect than 52, where you're like, you know, damn, if I fail here, it's going to be bad. You know, I've got a mortgage, I've got kids, I've got college, blah, blah, whatever it is. So let me ask you about moments where you had to push yourself or you had to think about, hey, I like this comfort zone. Do I go to that place that's not as comfortable? And what was your takeaway that maybe people here could take home?
Yeah.
Okay, Cindy.
I think as I told you in our you know, pre-interview or whatever, and you wrote so aptly in your column, which I've gotten absolutely a tongue lashing about, by the way, but I was an introvert, believe it or not, and anybody that knows me now would not probably describe me as an introvert, for better or for worse, I don't know. And there was a point with which I was moving from a developer into an analyst, to a business analyst, and that's kind of a very different role for any of you that have made that transition, right? I called it going from the cubicle into the boardroom, and I was like, oh, God, I've got to lead these sessions, and I've got to get people to collaborate and people to, you know, give me definitions and requirements and get people to work together and compromise and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work too well because that means pulling stuff out of people instead of somebody giving me requirements and just going and developing it. So that was kind of it was a growth point for me, moving kind of from an introvert to an extrovert and really feeling like, you know, I could get people to collaborate and what have you. But I would also tell you that the other story about in 2008, failing in a business, and I failed in a business, plain and simple, and I lost a lot of money. I can tell you that, and that was at, so let's see here, so I was 48 years old, 47 years old, failed late in life. Probably not the last time that I will, I'm sure, but I have to tell you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It really was, because there were 3 things that came out of that. Number 1, I would do it all over again, all over again. It was the best experience I've ever had in my life because I built something from scratch that was mine. I brought it to fruition. You probably have this with children. I've never had children, but you know, you bring something to life, you bring it, I mean, I designed it from the ground up, you bring it to life, and then you go through the other part of the life cycle, which is, you know, having to shut it down and having to go through all that emotion, et cetera. But it taught me much more than I could have ever from any success I would have ever had. It just was an amazing experience. And like I said, I'd do it all again. And now, from the standpoint of fearing failure, bring it on. You know, it's just, I think now I would do anything. I think I'm crazy enough I'd do anything. So.
And one thing you said on the phone was, we were talking before, was you said that mentors, I mean, I don't know if the mentors helped you in the restaurant situation. That sounds
I wish they would have. Clearly they were absent, but no.
Right, but maybe they would have told you not to do it, which would have been depriving you of experience. But that people, and I assume this was at PwC, or told you to do it, and why? Why that you could do it and why you should do it.
Yeah, you know, I think I've had a lot of great mentors through my career, a lot of great mentors, and I think the phrase that I told you is I've had a lot more people in my career that believed in me more than I believed in myself, and that was something that, ironically, it was kind of, I did the keynote at Open World, and one of the things that I said as my mother in her parting hours before she left this earth said the saddest thing that she was upset about in passing away was that she felt the person that believed in me more than I believed in myself was now leaving this earth. And I have to tell you, to me, that's a gift that all of us, if we can give it to somebody else, it's the greatest, in my mind, it's the greatest gift as a mentor that you can give to somebody else. Because you're all going to mentor somebody, and many somebodies that don't believe in themselves, and that you have to believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And you've got to prop them up, and you've got to keep them going, and you've got to be that strength and that courage that they don't have. And that's, I've had a lot of those people in my life, notwithstanding my mother, so.
Great. Nandini.
Yeah, I have similar stories. So when I was in college, I remember my professor said, make sure you learn one new thing every day. And in itself, it seems like a trivial little thing, but the reality is, most of us sleepwalk through life. We don't really learn even one new thing a day because we're doing the same thing that we've known yesterday and do it today and do it again tomorrow. Maybe do it better, but still. And I took that away, and I now looking back, I really think, you know, in a year you learn 365 new things. Yeah. There's nothing to replace that. I mean, you don't have to restrict it to one, but at least one new thing a day would be great. And speaking of comfort zones, I think that's really true. Even if you have to inch away from your comfort zone, you really want to try to do it. And I firmly believe if you're not doing something that makes you just a little uncomfortable, not just in technology, in anything, whatever you're doing. Like, I like to experiment when I cook. I mean, my cooking is already an experiment, but, you know, and most of us women are not afraid to try when you're cooking. You want to do something different, you're more than happy to do it. It's no different at work. Do something different. Try something you haven't done yet before. And if you find yourself in a spot where you feel like, you know what, I got this, I own this, you're not reaching far enough. I really think you always want to be just a little uncomfortable. Tiny bit uncomfortable. And in some cases you might have to leap off a cliff if you get laid off or whatever it is, and do it, because then you're well positioned. You already have done this so many times. Like Cindy said, when you fail, what the saying about what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger is very, very true. You know, that you will find that, you know, you're learning so much. And same thing is true for mentors. I've had great mentors, and I try to be a mentor to people as well. And one thing I will say, not just among women or men, across the board, leadership is not a quality that most people, I don't know whether they have it or not, maybe it's latent inside, but not everybody wants to lead. More people are happy and comfortable following.
Isn't that okay that some people want to be in that role?
Sure. But and not everybody is, you know, comfortable, nor are they capable of doing it. Like, and we want to have a good mix where some people are in the background, you know, it's like being a director versus an actor versus something else in a movie. You do need all those parts. But what I feel is when there's somebody with the capability to lead, they either don't know it or don't know how to make blossom in that role. That's the most unfortunate. You want to try to help people grow into those shoes. Like for you, it was your mother. For me, it was my grandmother, who always believed that I could do anything and do it better than men. And I grew up in India where, you know, it's a lot tougher. And I used to race motorbikes. And my grandmother's from a generation that's, you know, in India, she didn't get all these opportunities. And she supported me through that, you know, which is remarkable. And I come here and apparently women don't ride motorbikes here much either, so it's no different. It's everywhere. It was pushing the envelope. Her only fear was, please don't scar yourself because nobody will marry you. But other than that, she was fine with me doing things, you know, going outside my comfort zone. So you always need someone who's willing to believe that you can do so much more than you are today. So, you know, I don't know if you have...
Yeah. So I think for me, unfortunately, the uncomfortable moments just happen to present themselves rather than me going out and looking for them. My freshman year in college, my dad lost his job because it was that dot-com bubble burst, and being in tech, you know, it took him a while to get something back. And so I was presented with this, what do I do? Do I stay and foot a 100K bill, or do I figure something out? And I really wanted to be there. I really wanted to learn, even though I was like, you know, one of few women in this engineering college. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I just kind of learned to be in that uncomfortable moment because there was nothing else, like there was nowhere I could turn to, right? So I got a student loan and then got out of that situation, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like I can be resourceful, I can work through it, and that's the cool thing about being an engineer is you're resourceful, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're comfortable or not, like you learn to make do. So fast forward a couple of years and into my second startup, BusyBee, we actually ended up running out of capital. So we were doing it for 2 to 3 years. We had raised some angel money, but we just weren't making revenue fast enough to get to profitability and hitting our numbers to get another round of funding. And so once again, I was like, oh, I ran out of money, and I thought to myself, where have I experienced this before? When did I experience this moment in my life before? And I was like, yes, about 10 years ago, you know, when I was in college, and I thought, what did I do then? Okay, I can't go and take a loan, but I thought, you know, what did I do? Well, I made ends meet. I took a job, or I, you know, figured a way to make it happen, and that's exactly what I did with my startup. I learned to bootstrap. I learned to ask for more money. I learned to, you know, pull it out of that dire situation. And so for me, you know, it was more just like living in those uncomfortable moments, but also thinking back to ones that I had experienced in my youth. And that I see sometimes people forget. Like, they forget how resilient they were. They either get older and they're like, oh, well, I did that when I was like 10 or 25 or 30, but I'm not that same person anymore. You're like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not that same person? I find it hard to believe. Maybe I'm allowed because I'm, you know, only 31. But, you know, I think you have to dig back into those moments where you were uncomfortable, you made it through, and use that even to believe in yourself. Like, it's great to have others who believe in you, but use that as a way to believe in yourself. How did you get through that situation, and how can you continue to do that, you know, be in those uncomfortable situations and pull yourself out of them?
Great. Well, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, kind of keep track of them. I have a kind of a technical question, which is, you know, it seems when we were talking before about technical women and career tracks, that there's you know, at some companies there's a technical track, and then there's a management track. And that, Poornima, you were saying that women sometimes don't really know what the tracks are, or there's not a vision. And I was saying to her, well, can't they just do what I would do, which is like, oh, you know, I want to be a lawyer. Google, how do you become a lawyer? How do you become a partner? And there it is in Wikipedia. How do you become a partner? But what's hard to understand about the technical track, and then maybe this is something that everybody here just knows and you live and breathe it, but I was curious about what's the mystery of it, and then what makes these conversations difficult for women. And maybe it's going back to the original observation that you made, Nandini, which is that there's just not a lot of women around to talk to about this thing. But Poornima, I mean, what makes it hard for, you said you meet women who are mid-career, and they're just like, it's a mystery. I do not see how I can be keep along a technical track.
Yeah, sure. So, one, it's a very, very young industry, right? It's not like a lot of these other ones like law or medicine, where you've seen a lot of people go through it, like hundreds of years of practice. You know what the trajectory is like. There's a lot of literature on it. It's a pretty new industry, so you don't know. And then on top of that, you know, there are these interesting tracks like, oh, I could be a freelancer, or I could be in a big company, or I could be in a startup, but I don't know how my career is going to evolve. And for a number of women, that uncertainty can be really daunting, right? Like not knowing where you're going to be in 5 or 10 years. And so when they go on this technical track, it becomes well, you know, what does it look like in like 5 years or 10 years? Or like, what is a software architect? Or what's a VP of engineering? What is a CTO? Like, none of these things are ever, like, people don't say this is how you get to this point, because they all just kind of happen over time. And the men have gotten comfortable with that. I think just in general because they have a level of uncertainty that they're used to dealing with. But I think a lot of the women who are planners, like Allison said, you know, they want that plan, they want to know what's going to happen, but you just don't. Like, you may end up completely shifting. You may leave that big company, or you may join that big company, and then each one is a little bit different, right? So the big thing is, and once again, I am not trying to make a comparison here, but a lot of the men are really happy just building. Like, that to them is what's important. They're like, I'm building technology, that's what I care about, or I'm building a company and that's what I care about. But I think for the women, they need to have like the label, they need to have the ladder, and that makes it hard. And so for them, it's just like, well, I don't know what this will look like in 10 years, so let me like switch gears and go on a business track.
Like a clearer track.
Else. Yeah.
I'd be interested in, Cindy and Nandini, do you agree that that women have, I mean, I'm shy to even talk about this because we're now entering the zone of stereotyping or generalizing about women, but I'm just going to do it. Is there something about women that they want to see things in a certain way, or that men are more comfortable with, like, you know, working and building their whatever, their software? Bob the Builder. Barbie, yeah. Right, okay, so yeah, Bob the Builder versus Barbie. Okay, so, and what makes, this part of the career hard. And I'm thinking of you in particular because you talked about how you had a moment where you do jump to management track, and you're a very technical woman. So I'd be interested in kind of what you think about what Poornima was saying.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with her. The only other thing I will say, though, in most families, and this is again stereotyping, men tend to be the breadwinners. So in fact, it should be a lot harder for them to just jump off a cliff than it is for women, right, typically. But I think technology, the reason it's a little different than other fields, although now a lot of them are converging, is it's rapidly changing. So when I went to school and did programming, I mean, we learned structured programming. That was the only way. Today, you can be a kid who never went to school or learned any programming. You can start a company and get bought for 19 billion. The dynamics have changed so much. You kind of have to keep on top of it. And for women, I think we, at least speaking from my own experiences, we go through this phase. Yes, you come out of school and sure, there's a little bit of pressure to get married and all that, maybe less than it is for men, I'm not sure, but you go through this thing, and then some of us choose to take a little detour to have kids or whatever it is. By the time you come back, there's an iPhone, and all your landscape is just shifted under you. You know, these things happen, and in technology, I think they happen a lot more quicker than they do in anything else. So you do want to stay on top of it, read more, and talk to more people, and you should be willing to have men as mentors, and I think a lot of us fail to do that because there's more of them around you in technology. I mean, just in, you know, so reach out to men and ask the questions, even if there are not enough women to support and help you. Otherwise, I'm one of those who fundamentally believe men and women are the same, because if you take my soccer group, there are far more women than there are dads. However, the women are extremely aggressive. They know what they want. They can organize. They can rally. They can raise money better than any person I know who wants to do a startup. However, if you transplant the same thing into a tech industry and say, go have at it, talk to the VCs, there's so much discomfort. So I really believe it's because you feel you're on solid ground, when the reality is I'm not. When I go to those things, I have no idea how to knock on someone's door and ask for money when it comes to whatever, you know. So I think women, I really believe, are capable. And yes, there are logistical, tactical things, like I choose to do makeup. My husband doesn't have any makeup on. He just leaves up and leaves in the morning. Right. I have high heels on, and I can't run as fast as someone to my next meeting. So there are tactically some choices we as women make, which are different, than, and not all of us do, but some of us. But other than that, I personally believe we're mostly alike. And yes, women are more nurturing. You want to try to, you know, and empathetic, like Cindy was saying, but you want to leverage those skills or things. I
just want to go back to something that you said before I turn to Cindy. Would you talk a little bit about that moment where you were like, I don't want to become a manager, that's a cop-out. Yes. I'm a very technical woman, and it almost sounded like you were being a little macho.
I was, and I think I really tried very hard. So I was on a technical track, which most companies, I'm sure all of you know, have a technical track and they have a management track within engineering. And then there's all these others, you can go to HR and finance and everything else as well. But within the technical track, there were very few women architects. And my father is a scientist, and I always felt like I want to be like that. I want to be technical. I want to be an architect in my title, not be a manager. And for the longest time, my managers used to say, you, as a lead, you're mostly doing all of the work of a manager except doing reviews. And I felt switching to management was a cop-out. I felt like I just gave up, and not that there's anything wrong with it, I'm management now, but I did it when I had no choice because I didn't control the resources. And I felt like I couldn't translate my ideas into any project unless I owned the resources and could assign projects. And that sort of led me to say, fine, I'll do management. And I really felt like, darn it, I gave up, because I used to be very technical. And now I'm glad I did. I wish I'd done it sooner, because I think I'm thriving in that. I like what I do. However, it took me the longest time to do that. And maybe many people struggle with that. I don't know. That was my personal.
Let me turn to Cindy for a second about men, women. What makes this hard in terms of thinking about careers, building a career in the technical field?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think, and I don't necessarily think that we have a definitive path, if you may say. I mean, as an example, I was in a pre-med program that's, that was what I wanted to become, was a doctor. And thank God in my second year, they put anybody in pre-med at UCSD, they put in a clinical setting. And so I got thrown in San Diego General Hospital and realized quite quickly that I couldn't stand the sight of blood. That's a little bit of a problem if you want to be a bone surgeon. So that kind of, dampened my spirit a little bit. I was like, okay, what can I do? But if you think about the critical thinking of a doctor and being able to diagnose a problem, for whatever reason, I said, okay, if I can be a critical thinking doctor and I understand diagnosing a problem, I could certainly diagnose a business problem and develop technology to be able to fix a business problem. So I think we look at a little bit too much stereotyping, and I think we got to get out of this, because we've got a problem with the number of women going into technology. If we keep looking at those that graduate in engineering, those that graduate in computer science, those that graduate in STEM careers, we're hosed. We're hosed.
Right,
we're not going to get there from here.
Right.
You can look at women. When I was at Price Waterhouse, we would look at women that were auditors. If you can go and audit a Global 1000 company and write a report for the SEC that verifies that all their finances in order, and you could do that kind of forensic analysis, you sure the heck can analyze why somebody's supply chain isn't running effectively or efficiently, and figure out a computer program that can help figure out what's wrong with their inventory. And so we got to get out of this mindset of that it's these types of skills that we create. I've always been, and I'm 52 years old, and I've always, as a manager, said I would rather hire somebody that has great will to succeed than skill. And so I always say, when I do interviewing, how much skill, how much will. If will outstrips the skill, I'll hire them in a heartbeat, because I can teach them the skill. And if somebody has a will to succeed, if they have courage, gumption, stick-to-itiveness, perseverance, all that stuff, and I think they'll stick through the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'll hire them and I'll train them. And I think what we're seeing, and I just read an article last night actually that was written about Google. We're looking at trade programs to bring more people into trades because they can't afford college, and that's hiring somebody that doesn't have necessarily the skill, but they have the will, train them on the skill that they need, and get them into a living wage job. That's not college. If they want to go to college after that, awesome. But you take all these inner city schoolgirls that have absolutely no hope of ever going to college, and does that mean that they're not competent and capable and don't have the kind of skills that we need for computer science? I think not. I think not.
I just want to remind everybody, we're going to break for some questions in a few minutes. Well, let's break now. I see some hands up. Okay, if you want to go to the microphone, and that'd be great. But while you're going there, I'll ask another question, which is, I'm interested in what companies talk a lot of talk about women being good for women and trying to, have programs for women. Who does it well? What works? What doesn't work? Anybody?
Well, I can do a commercial. We have 35% of our executives are women at IBM. So look down the line. Look at Ginny. Look at all of our women that are in tech positions. I think we do it well, so it's my commercial.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of programs, and Oracle has a women's leadership, and we do a lot to empower, but unfortunately not everybody reaches out and leverages the program. It's one thing to have the program and do outreach, but ultimately you have to help yourself. And,
Poornima, you deal with a lot of women in lots of companies.
Right. Well, I mean, at Femgineer, we get a number of companies that sponsor us and that have us do events. So as I look down our roster, we've done, 14, 15 events now, and all these companies have resources. And what's funny to me, though, is that the women who aren't in these companies, right, they're like, oh, I didn't know such things existed. And it's kind of that you have to take the time, which is as simple as going to Google and typing in what companies have these resources, which ones have the mentorship, the Women's Resource Council, opportunities to do shadowing programs, rotation programs. I think this is a time, 10 years ago, these did not exist. When I started, I was on a very male-dominated team. I had mostly male mentors, and I think a lot of women today don't know that there's this much resource and opportunity. I almost wish I could get in a time machine and go back and participate in some of these programs, because I'm wondering what would happen as a result, right? So I see a lot of companies putting in a lot of effort, but sometimes what I also see in companies is they end up closing down the program because there's not interest. The women either don't want them because they feel like, oh, I'm being labeled or whatnot, you know, just make use of the opportunity.
Yeah,
like,
and if a man opens the door for you, let him.
Do it, you know? Like, take the $1,000 to go to a conference, take the $10,000 to go do a master's at wherever you want. Like, make use of it. Who cares if they've labeled it, right? Because there's probably some other, you know, fund that exists for someone else. So it's okay. You don't have to feel guilty about it, but do it, make use of it, and then pay it forward. So I see a lot of these programs coming, and I really hope they stick around, and I really hope people make use of them. But I oftentimes see that they're not being made use of. People aren't taking advantage of the resources.
Great.
And then the companies feel like there's no ROI, and then they shut them down, or they're like, why are we putting all this effort into it? So go back, and if your company has a program, or if you don't know, go investigate, but then make use of them.
And also, I want to just, on closing, if you find your company doesn't have something, go ask for it. Start it. Because at least I'm positive pretty much every company in the Valley will love to do whatever it takes. So if it isn't there, come up with ideas. Yeah.
Great. Hi. Hi. Question.
Actually, it's more towards the question that you had asked, but it's not from a company. Since Cindy, you and Nandini did mention that you were fortunate enough to have good mentors. Can you actually elaborate more on, was it you seeking for the mentors, or did it kind of fall in place? How did that happen, and how should we go around seeking a mentor?
Great question.
Yeah, I think even though early in my career I would have been labeled probably an introvert, I think if there was one word that probably people would describe me in my entire career that has been consistent, is I've been passionate about whatever I've done. And when people see you're passionate about something, and therefore you're probably going to stick to it, and you're dedicated, and you're just going to keep pounding the pavement to get things right and to move forward, I think they gravitate toward helping you. And I've seen that as a manager. When I see people that are passionate about what they're doing, and they're going to just keep coming at it, right? Even when they fail, they're going to keep trying and trying and trying. I'll actually seek them out and say, how can I help you? Because I gravitate toward those people, and I am humbled by them, and I want to see to their success. So I think if that trait comes through and people see you're passionate, I think people have always gravitated to say, how can I help you, right? Because they've seen that I've been passionate. And maybe, again, I've been just lucky, but I think that's been what's worked.
It's an interesting question, because of course, probably a lot of people have read Sheryl Sandberg's book, and she says one chapter is don't ask somebody to be your mentor, but it happens organically, or whatever that means, you know. But anybody else on the mentor question?
I think one thing is to network. You're here at this event, right? You meet a lot of people, and you immediately find synergy with certain people more than others, and you can connect with them. Keep building up on it. Same in the environment where you work, and it'll distill into somebody, and you have to be unafraid to reach out, and then consistently reach out. Being a mentor or having a mentor takes sustainability. It's not overnight. You can't just talk to someone and expect, okay, I got touched and it's going to happen, right? So it's a give and take of two people, and that relationship then you will end up distilling, I think, into mentorship. It didn't happen by accident. And I still have mentors, and I still try to mentor. So it's, even though I'm old.
Poornima.
Yeah, I think, like I said, a lot of women approach me, and it's great that they all want me to be their mentor, but I don't have time to be everyone's mentor, right? So I oftentimes tell them, well, you should go and talk to this person or that person. And then when they do, they're like, well, they said no. And I said, of course they said no, because they don't have time. Like, would you say yes to every person that came up to you the first time? And you kind of have to, like Nandini said, you need to be persistent, one. And two, you have to meet them halfway, right? So I get a lot of this, like, oh, I don't want to drive up to San Francisco. I'm like, oh, do you have kids? No. Do you not have a car? No. Well, then what's the big deal? Like, why can't you go meet that? If you really want that person to mentor you, why can't you meet them halfway, right? Or why can't you try a couple times? And then if it really does become an issue, then go look for someone else. And it doesn't always have to be like, oh, you have to have this one person, right? It's not like if I don't have Cheryl or Marissa mentoring me, I'm screwed, right? I could get someone else too. So I think that's the other thing to think about. And Allison mentioned this as well. is to think also about mentorship not just as someone who's senior to you, but even at the same level, and oftentimes even junior. I learn a lot from recent grads about new technology, because they're always like, you know, in the know, right? So I learn about that from them, or I learn about some new process. So keep that in mind. It doesn't always have to be, I've got to find the 50, 60-year-old who's like a Fortune 500 CEO to be my mentor, or I've got to look in my company, or I've got to find the VP. You know, there are other people. It's like Nandini said, it's about the synergy and how you feel, but you have to keep that relationship going. And I know that's a little bit difficult when you've got other things on your plate. So take it slow and don't feel like you have to meet every week, every month. You know, it can be a natural process, but you have to put the step because you're the one asking for help.
Great. Another question.
Great. Hi, my name is Phyllis, and I have one observation and a question for you guys. So I've actually worked in technology companies for close to 30 years. I spent 8 years with IBM, 8 years with Sun Microsystems, wow. And then I've consulted to a lot of high-tech companies, Google, Oracle, a whole bunch. So I've always been very involved with very technical people, lots of women, and I'm not technical. So I really think it's always really important, too, to have that cross-functional relationship with people in organizations who aren't the technical side, but understand and appreciate the technical, because such important partnerships develop from that. So I just wanted to share that insight. I'm also really curious to know, I know, Michelle, you've mentioned Anita Borg Institute, and I'm very involved with them, but what are the other really good technical organizations you belong to or you would recommend to women in technology?
Great question.
So once again, in the last 10 years, there has been an amazing number of women's technical organizations that have formed. And they've all formed into little meetup groups. They meet sometimes weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, sometimes monthly. So a few of them on the software side, sorry, I'm a little bit constrained, but if you need hardware, you can come talk to me after and I can look them up. But on the software side, there's Women Who Code. There's obviously my organization, Femgineer. We run a monthly event. There's Pi Ladies. And all of these are, ours isn't a nonprofit, but the other ones are a nonprofit. And they do run events, and they are very technically minded, so they will help you with like interview skills, algorithm skills, even, hey, I'm trying to learn how to build this new, iPhone app or whatever technology you might not know. So a lot of those have come up, and they've, I think, been great in terms of keeping people's skills sharp, but also fostering some of that social interaction. So if you need that, if you need to learn from other people, I would encourage you to go look up some of these meetups. And then obviously Anita Borg has a big Grace Hopper conference. Yeah. I've heard, I unfortunately haven't been to one yet, but I've heard only good things in terms of how that helps with your career development, getting you in front of companies, getting you recruited.
Nandini.
Well, actually, you covered most of them.
Most of them? Okay.
But, I mean, there's also Watermark is great, depending on where you are, and then PBWC, and including Invent Your Future. There are a lot of them. And then I also try to do things like Girls Who Code. It's not just about people who are already there, right? You want to try to find them when they're still struggling and lost. Mm-hmm. So you can help and motivate them to become part of this industry where we're all sitting here. But.
Cindy, did you have any others to add?
No, I think they covered pretty
okay.
well.
Yeah, we've got a list of like 17 on our blog. So if you visit Femgineer blog, just look up women's organizations, and we've got a list for you.
Sorry, but can I just add to that? So NC-WIT.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. Awesome.
Technology, and they have alliances, so they have K-12 alliance and
Yep. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They are really a fabulous resource.
Yes, they are.
You can find
Yep.
list, and they have, I mean, they've been on
Yep.
the partner, so they're really trying to invite all these other people so you can find other groups that have the same needs.
Great suggestion. If anybody here, was it NC-WIT?
NC-WIT, yeah.
Okay, great. Please.
Hi, my name's Farah Chadwick, and I'm a founder of Startup Pair Up, and it's a community site where we help educated professional women re-enter the workforce, and where companies can post jobs and they connect with each other. And so that's also a resource. But one of the struggles that our women have is, let's say they used to be an engineer, but now years later technology has changed. What do they do now? And we always try to tell our women that, think about what you can offer. When you look at a company and you're interested in them, find out what you can do, where are their needs, and have the ability to wear different hats rather than be hung up on a title and so forth. So just a comment.
So kind of like Poornima's suggestion of figure out the leverage. What do you have? Understand the organization, what they're trying to do, and then figure out how you go in there. And have you seen that work for women who are sort of who are, I know the term is on-ramping.
Yes.
They've off-ramped, now they're trying to get back on.
That's right. Resume gap, on-ramp. Yeah, I mean, I think the smaller the company we find, the more flexibility there is. These are the same women who also want to be able to pick up their kids, from school. So they're looking for flexible jobs, and small companies are looking for great talent at good value. So that's the exchange that they make.
Great.
Yeah.
The name of your...
It's called Startup-Pair Up.
Pair Up, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And is it a nonprofit or a for-profit? It's for-profit, okay. Great, we have another question. Excellent.
Hi, my name is Bhavna, and I wanted to, I was very interested in a couple of comments that Nandini made about, how women being a minority in the room might find it difficult to speak up. My personal experience has been, in fact, it gives you a great platform to get noticed. At least that's what I've noticed, that, every time I speak up or I make a presentation, it gets noticed not because I'm great or whatever, but, because I'm different. And I don't know if that's good or bad different, but, I'm different, and that definitely people look up, definitely pay attention and say, oh, okay, this person is presenting, or if you make a mistake, higher potential of getting noticed as well. So it can go both ways. The second thing was, you spoke about, you had this plan for, I wanted to become an architect, or, I went into management. And yes, everybody more or less is aware of all these options, but I used to work for a company in the East Coast, and I've noticed that there's something called the Old Boys Club, right? Again,
it's not just in the East Coast,
okay.
by the way.
Yeah. I see less of it here.
Wherever there are boys.
Old Boys Club is in case somebody didn't quite hear.
Pretty much just call it.
Right. So, my biggest problem was that, yes, I was doing well. I know my work was getting noticed for whatever reason, but I was still not able to penetrate into the clique or the kind of people who are the makers, who make things happen. And not that I want to go out there on my own merit of my work, not because I want to be a part of anything, but just getting noticed. If you're a part of that group, you go out, go for a beer on Friday night, it's easier to break that wall. Whereas I don't drink beer. I come from, I grew up in India. I learned football because, I thought that's an easy way to communicate with people. And so there's a lot of things that stop you from being a part of that club, or I don't even want to be a part of that club. So what has helped you, go
That's
around
a fantastic question.
That's a great question.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go. Go for it.
I'm happy to take it, yeah. I think it's twofold. It's not just about going out to have a beer or something. It's true for, if you're a vegetarian and everybody's going for sushi day or whatever it is, and you can't participate because you don't eat meat, or, it's all of this is being part of a clique and you go through this starting at middle school and high school. So it's always a constant thing. And one thing I would say is, it's okay to be part of that Old Boys network or want to be part of it. There's nothing wrong one way or the other, and not wanting to be part of it. But I think at a tactical level, these are logistical things you have to consider. Maybe you go to the pub, hang out, and don't drink a beer. Get a, ice water, whatever it is, lemonade. But you can still hang out even if you're different, because you're already saying, right, you're a minority in a group of people where you're willing to stand up and present. You could be that minority wherever you go. It's okay to do that wherever it is. And at a tactical level, it does matter. I will say it does absolutely.
So just to be clear, at a tactical level, it matters that you're going to go to the pub, that you're thinking, I want to be part of that group who are the makers. How do I get there?
Exactly. If that group is the group that makes certain decisions, it's like the sales guys. They take people out golfing. I don't know how to play golf. But, and when I was younger, I'd be intimidated if I didn't know something to be part of that. Now, I'll suck at golf, be part of the joke, and then still get what I want done and come back. It's part of putting yourself out there, even if it's uncomfortable, whether it's drinking beer or playing golf or what have you, or talking about CRM. When I came to Oracle, I didn't have a clue about all these apps, and I've learned now. And so I don't think that necessarily is any different than any other aspects of our interactions, is what I'm long-winded way of saying.
No,
fascinating. I'm dying to hear the rest.
I think it falls square in the get out of your comfort zone. I mean, I'm sorry to say, we were just, Mina and I were just talking about this. We still, in some ways, and I think we both share this, we still tend to be a little bit introverted in certain ways. Like, I personally, it's like absolutely, nails on a chalkboard for me to have to go to a social event. Like, go mill around with a, cocktail and chat with people. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. And there's nothing I'd rather not do, but I have to do it. It's part of my job. If I want to meet people, if I want to network, it's part of my job. And it's part of the level that I'm at IBM or in my career. If I said I wasn't going to do it and I shied away from it, it would be career limiting, guaranteed. But do I want to do it? Heck no. And it's not somewhere in my repertoire of anything I enjoy doing. But, then I'll say, okay, it's a 2-hour event, I'll go do it for an hour. I'll stomach an hour, I'll go do it, and then, that one quick trip to the bathroom and I never come back. But at least I did the hour.
Where'd she go?
Yeah.
Cindy.
I have a quick follow-up to that comment, right? So, yes, okay, I'm willing to go to the pub, but I don't get asked. You know what I'm saying? I have to leave.
Yeah, you're never going to get an invite.
Yes.
You're never going to get it. You're also not going to get invite to their bathrooms. So that's
a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
And that I've seen a lot of times. It's like, and I think some of it's social conditioning, right? We get like invited to prom. We get, and mind you, I didn't have that, but we get invited to all these things. We get used to it. We expect it. But that's not how it works, right? In an old boys club, right, it's members only. So to become a member, either somebody, you hope they invite you, but they're not going to, so you just have to show up.
That's right.
And then you have to be like, oh, is this a boys club? I didn't realize. I just like walked the wrong way. Is it okay if I stay, right? So, and that's where you just have to work your way
because
in.
This happened to me. I was sitting with a coworker, same my level, everything, and a couple of directors walk in and they say, hey, hi, have a nice weekend to me. And then they say, oh, Jeff, let's go. And Jeff is just at my level, but now Jeff gets to hang out with them for a couple of hours. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm packing my bags and going back home. So this is one of those things where you don't know, okay, how
tag along.
Well, I think it's twofold. One is you have to be prepared to accept a no. No. Some people just don't want you in that club, and either you have to be willing to persist, and you have to be willing to take no for an answer and realize it's hard, and then find a back door to get into that club. And there are always, all of us know how to do these things, right? If you really, and then you have to think whether you really want to be part of a club that really doesn't want you either. But
yeah.
But sorry, you were going to say something.
No, because I think that a lot of times people describe, okay, the old boys club is that older men like younger men because it reminds them of themselves. There's a comfort level, familiarity, and you are an outsider coming in. And you can't change that maybe even biological feeling that is going on there about one generation to the next. But what it sounds like what you're all saying is breaking in matters, and you got to try to do it.
Frankly, nowadays there's more of a youngsters club than there is an old boys network because there are all these people, and I say this, having a VP title is actually a negative sometimes because people automatically assume you're old, whether you are or not. And now it's cooler to be part of this young, hip generation that lives in San Francisco, has done a startup or two or whatever you might be, and they look at you like Oracle. You come with an Oracle and IBM tag. I don't know how you feel, Cindy. Like,
I don't feel old.
These dinosaur companies, and they, there's a different thing where you have, for me, I feel like I have to break into that. And then you hang out with them a couple times, and then they're thinking, you know what? For an old fuddy-duddy, she's not that bad. And then you break the ice and you get in because it is like, I feel there's, the valley goes through ups and downs where it's no longer cool to be someone who's seasoned. There are a lot of people looking for younger people who've, won the lottery once and know it all, so.
I just want to, we're at the final kind of 4 minutes, and one thing I was interested in is summing up, kind of takeaway points. And one question that Cindy asked was kind of, I'm going to throw this out there to maybe frame the discussion, but you can ignore it too, is kind of, given the technical world right now, what skills do women have that make them poised to succeed or not succeed? And what can what do you need, basically? Let me put it in a positive way. What skills do women need to succeed in this climate? And I bring that up because there's something that Poornima said to me was, this is a different world. Maybe you said this to me, Cindy. This is different than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think she had a very good response.
You want to say?
I think, and maybe I'm just altruistic, and I would just characterize myself as fairly altruistic, so just throw that on the table. But I would tell you, when you look at the tech world today, or the world period, and where the world's going, highly social world, highly collaborative world, people that want to get back to what you may say roots, right, with empathy, treating people with respect, all that stuff, right? We see our younger generation, they want to listen to older music, right? They want to listen to Frank Sinatra music, all that, because there's a hearkening to go back a little bit to things that are a little bit more simple, et cetera. And you think of women, great collaborators, very empathetic, great listeners. Our soft skills, in my mind, today are tenfold better than most men. I'm sure most of you, know men that have those soft skills, but let me just generalize here. Our soft skills are great for the world that we're living in today, the tech world we're living in today, the types of skills for the generations that are coming up. They want to be met where they are, not where you are. They don't want to have to come to you. They'll meet you maybe in the middle if you're lucky, but they want you to come to them, and they want to know that you'll be willing to come to them, no matter whether you're 52 years old or whatever. And so I think we're really, really well poised for the world today. Women and our traits are really well poised. I'm very bullish about we as a gender and our ability to be successful.
Oh wait, here's a question.
Like to add to that point is that in the last few years with the financial turmoil and the number of men who got into question, there were articles about saying how women are more steady and are more ethical and a better
Amen. How many women have been indicted? How many women have been indicted since 2008 on any financial scandal?
Although you could say that the problem was the pool was small. Okay.
You know what? I don't care.
Sorry, but,
look at the reality is, if women wanted to get to the top, and that's what we aspired to do, you could postulate that we should have been indicted more because we would have done more unethical things to get to the top. So I actually
in 10 years we'll come back here and hopefully we'll have some indicted women that we can hold up as a model of.
Any of us, though.
Okay, not any of us. A couple more words of wisdom, Poornima and Nandini. Yes.
So I think, and mind you, once again, like I'm saying this, and it may be like, oh, she seems really young, so you may take it with a grain of salt. But having, and I do have some mentors who are much older than me, and I see them now starting their businesses and their careers and doing it again, and I'm actually impressed. My thing is like, oh, I wonder if I'll be able to start a startup at 50. Like, they've got a lot of energy, right? So I think too often what happens is people get into this mindset of like, I am at X age or X level or whatever, and that then becomes the excuse to not do something. Right? Or, oh, it seems like all the companies are started by like 20-year-old boys who are dropping out, therefore I can't start one, right? So there's a lot of these stereotypes that happen that prevent us from even stepping up, rather than asking the question of, what are the traits, what are the skills, what is that is needed, and okay, yes, it may be a little bit harder, yes, it may mean that we're not part of the club, but can we still figure out how to do this? Because the big thing is, like, we're engineers at the end of the day. We figure stuff out, right? If we can figure out how to build things, we should still be able to figure out how to solve, human problems as well. And I think too often we just forget that, and we let our biology or whatever dictate, and it just goes completely out the window, right? So I want you to think of yourself as, I'm a problem solver, I know I can do this, I'm resourceful, and use that rather than, anything else.
Great. Nandini?
Yeah, I agree. I think now's the time because technology has made it so easy. You can stay at home and use a browser to go find data. You can learn. They have online courses for free if you want to, like somebody was asking, I've been away and I want to come back. For women, I think, who have these things where I go off to take time off to have a baby or whatever it is, or you're intimidated because somebody else knows how to do data structures better than you or whatever it is, you have the prep time. Like now when I go speak at places where I have no idea what's going on, I quickly read up about the person, about who I'm talking to. Like the amount, I didn't have that when I was younger, or even none of us had it a few years ago. So at our fingertips, we have so much information. It makes it so much easier for us now to distill and learn quickly and adapt. So one thing I will encourage you to have a healthy mix of older and younger people surrounding you as mentors, because it's important. There's skills you develop, you know, the risk-taking ability versus the seasoned understanding of, oh, that's fire, let me not touch it. Both of those are important, and the sooner you can understand that and learn from people around you, the better. So, and step out of your comfort zone.
So some messages: step out of your comfort zone, break into the boys' club if you think it's important to get in there. Leverage, figure out what your leverage is. I'm summarizing for you, but also for myself, and also, by the way, this has been web streamed on the Mercury News website. And I just
now you tell us.
Oh, sorry. Oops, I forgot. Oh well. Thank you to the panelists, and it's just been an honor talking to you about these issues. Real pleasure, and the audience with great questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.